Coming up today, Korea's GDP growth is expected to slide this year as falling exports and external uncertainties take their toll on the Korean economy. Korea, the United States and Japan will hold trilateral defense talks next month on Tokyo's new security policy. The unpopular changes have sent Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's approval ratings through the floor. First members of Korea's main opposition party confirm their faith in the leadership of Moon Jae-in, but hope that it could end factional strife within the party is fading already. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 21st of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the latest bleak outlook for Korea's economy. Facing declining exports and global economic uncertainties, many financial institutions are predicting that Korea's GDP could fall to the low 2% range this year. Kwon So-ah reports.
An almost 1% drop in the country's economic growth compared to last year is what many financial institutions are forecasting for Korea's 2015 GDP. If that holds true, it could be the worst result since 2012 and possibly 2009 since the aftermath of the global financial crisis. Although the average outlook from 36 global institutions stands at 2.5%, major financial services companies such as Morgan Stanley and Moody's estimate that Korea's GDP growth will only reach 2.3%. Nomura Securities and IHS Economics forecast 2.2% growth and DKB 2.1%. One of the biggest culprits behind Korea's slowing growth is sluggish exports, which have posted negative results for 8 straight months this year. But in the latter half of the year, there are even more factors of concern.
We saw a less than 2.5% growth in the first half of the year. When factoring in the MERS crisis, China's yuan depreciation, and expectations of a US interest rate hike, the second half of the year is expected to be less than the government's 3% range goal.
In the longer run, domestic institutions have also downgraded a longer-term potential growth rate. LG Research Institute estimates Korea's GDP will grow by an average 1.7% between 2020 and 2030.
As the world changes from a manufacturing to more service-focused economy, and with developing countries such as China advancing in terms of technology, it has become much more difficult to improve productivity.
On top of that, factoring in the aging population, a downward trend is expected within the next 2 years. That's why experts stress the need for next-generation growth engines to be discovered as soon as possible. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Loans extended by Korean banks for home rentals have soared over the past 5 years amid a surge in rental prices. According to data, loans for deposit-linked home rentals, or jeonse, by the 6 largest local banks totaled $15.8 billion as of the end of last month. And this is a 9-fold increase from $1.7 billion at the end of 2010. Koreans are borrowing more due to a surge in jeonse prices, which have risen 40% in just 4 years. The average jeonse rent in Seoul now stands at over $300,000. Jeonse rates now account for about 70% of the value of the property, as more homeowners prefer monthly rentals due to low interest rates on bank deposits. Experts say demand for jeonse and a shortage of homes will likely push prices even further up. Now, it's supposed to end the internal strife gripping Korea's main opposition party, but the New Politics Alliance for Democracy's confirmed confidence in the leadership of Moon Jae-in may end up having the opposite effect and lead to the party breaking up. Despite Moon withdrawing his plans to put his leadership up for a vote to focus on uniting the party, members of the minority faction still oppose the party's new set of reform plans on the candidate nomination process adopted last week ahead of next year's general elections. NPAD defector Chun Jung-bae has announced plans to launch a new political party in January, vowing to secure victory in the general elections. Now, this announcement is worrying news for the NPAD's mainstream members as it could lead to more defections. Meanwhile, the NPAD's former co-chairman, Ahn Cheol-soo, says Moon's proposal will only aggravate matters, and has proposed his own anti-corruption measures, calling for zero tolerance. The wave of discontent is growing in Japan over the recent enactment of new legislation that allows the country's military to fight overseas. Now, faced with plunging approval ratings at home, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will seek support from an international audience in the coming days. Son Jung-in has more.
Tokyo-based public broadcaster NHK reports that some 170 scholars from more than 140 Japanese universities held a news conference on Sunday. Calling it an outrageous act of abandoning Japan's pacifist constitution, the group urged lawmakers to immediately scrap the new security bills that were passed by the upper house of the Diet the previous day. They declared an all-out movement for new democracy, which they said had just begun. On the same day, activists continued to rally in front of the Diet building in Tokyo. They are deeply opposed to the bills that allow Japan to send its military into overseas conflicts to defend allies, even if the country itself is not under attack. The approval rating for Abe's cabinet dropped below 39% right after Japan's nationalist leader pushed through the legislation despite fierce opposition. A poll conducted by Kyodo News Agency over the weekend showed the cabinet's approval rating dropped 4.3 percentage points from the previous poll in mid-August, while the cabinet's disapproval rate spiked to over 50%. The survey also showed a majority of respondents were opposed to the bills, with nearly 80% saying there were not enough deliberations in the Diet. Abe will attempt to earn support from the new legislation at the UN General Assembly. Sources say he plans to win understanding from the international community during a speech next week. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And Japan's new security policy will be front and center of defense talks next month between South Korea, the United States and Japan. A government official in Seoul says the three countries will discuss follow-up measures after Japan lays out the details of the changes. Now, the date and location of the meeting is yet to be confirmed, but it's expected to be held before the annual Korea-US Security Consultative meeting that is scheduled for mid-October. Now, Seoul plans to reiterate its stance that Japan will not be allowed to dispatch troops to the Korean Peninsula in an emergency situation without the Korean government's prior consent. The first round of negotiations on a free trade deal between Korea and 6 Central American countries has begun in Seoul. Trade ministers from Korea, El Salvador, Panama, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua and Costa Rica agreed to push for a comprehensive FTA back in June. These Central American countries together make up the 5th largest market in Latin America. Trade volume between Korea and the 6 countries has nearly doubled over the past decade, totaling $5 billion last year. If the proposed FTA is signed, Korea would become the first Asian country to sign a deal with all 6 countries. Trade officials say Korea would be able to export more automobiles, auto parts and electronics, while bringing in more coffee and fruit from the Central American nations. The talks are set to wrap up on Friday. Now, it's one of the most highly anticipated meetings of the year. The leaders of the world's 2 superpowers will sit down in Washington this week. They have plenty to talk about, not least how they will handle an unpredictable North Korea. For a look at the possible scenarios, Han-dan reports.
As far as state visits go, it doesn't get any bigger than Chinese President Xi Jinping's first official trip to Washington this week. With President Xi and U.S. President Barack Obama set to hold summit talks at the White House on Friday local time, observers are watching how they broach the sensitive issues of China's militarization of the South China Sea and its alleged cyber attacks on the U.S. It's this backdrop that led a professor at Princeton University to say that the atmosphere surrounding the summit could be worst since the late 1980s. Despite their differences, Washington and Beijing share some common ground, and that includes North Korea. Political watchers say the two sides are likely to send a clear message to North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. They say a tangible outcome could be reached if the two sides meet halfway. Currently, Washington maintains a hardline policy of deterrence and sanctions towards North Korea, while China plays a kind of big brother role, seeking to persuade the regime to abide by its international obligations. Experts add that a joint statement, expected shortly after the summit, will also give the world a clearer view of China's North Korea policy, which has grown more ambiguous since Kim Jong-un came to power. Watchers say the best outcome as far as North Korea issues are concerned would be that Obama and Xi can coax Pyongyang back to the negotiating table and find a breakthrough in the six-party nuclear talks that have been stalled since 2008. 한다은, Arirang News.
Now, the Syriza party has secured another dramatic victory in Greece's snap general election, which was held on Sunday, winning a fifth election in 6 years. Alexis Tsipras vowed to rid the government of corruption and pledge stability. Connie Kim reports.
Greek leftist Alexis Tsipras declared victory in Sunday's snap general election, claiming a clear mandate to recover Greece's stumbling economy. Into 51% of the Sunday's vote count, the left-wing Syriza party had 35.5% of the votes, with the conservative New Democracy trailing with 28.1%. Tsipras vowed to root out the regime's corruption and pledged stability.
It was a difficult battle, and I feel vindicated today because the Greek people gave us a clear mandate to continue fighting inside and outside the country and boost our people's pride.
The general election results give Syriza 145 seats in the 300-member parliament and New Democracy 75 seats. The right-wing Independent Greeks party won 10 parliamentary seats. Syriza had formed a coalition with the Independent Greeks, and the two parties now have enough to secure a majority in parliament. Tsipras made no specific comments on the €85 billion bailout made in July, but the left-wing party pledged to implement the bailout program, which is due for review next month. Tsipras will have to persuade European Union leaders that sufficient steps have been made to ensure the next payment. The snap election was called after Tsipras was forced to back down from posts as European leaders refused to write off Greece's debt and roll back austerity measures. Despite the results, the International Monetary Fund says Greece needs substantial debt relief. Greek GDP is forecast to shrink 2.3% this year and by 1.3% in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The refugee crisis in Europe has claimed yet more lives. 13 people, including 6 children, have drowned after their inflatable dinghy collided with a Turkish boat. The Greek Coast Guard says the dinghy, which was carrying 48 people, was heading from Turkey to the Greek island of Lesbos when it sank. 22 refugees were rescued by the Coast Guard. Now, this latest incident comes a matter of days after another overcrowded dinghy sank, killing 34. The Turkish government says more than 270 refugees have died in the seas around Turkey and Greece this year while they attempt to get to Europe. Now, on a much brighter note, Korean footballer Son Heungmin scored his first English Premier League goal for Tottenham Hotspur on Sunday. The match-winning goal came in the 67th minute as Tottenham defeated Crystal Palace 1-0 at White Hart Lane. Son was awarded Man of the Match honours as well for his efforts. The striker scored 2 goals earlier in the week in a Europa League fixture, taking his tally to 3 goals in 3 games for the North London club. Son signed from Bayer Leverkusen in the summer for £22 million. That's roughly $34 million, making him the most expensive Asian player in history. Tottenham fans will be hoping that he continues his goal-scoring run as they face their arch rivals Arsenal on Wednesday in the English League Cup. Online cartoon series known in Korea as webtoons are really popular here and have even provided the stories for hit TV series and movies. And blurring the lines between the various platforms even further, a webtoon is making the leap from cyberspace to musical stage. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Chang Sun-ji's dream is to find a job at a conglomerate while Ching-yeon repeatedly fails the exam to become a public servant. These characters in Unlimited Power reflect the harsh realities of youth unemployment in Korea. However, the story of their struggles is not something new. The characters have been winning the hearts of online viewers for years. Unlimited Power first appeared on a portal site 7 years ago as a webtoon. By 2013, it was so popular that it was made into 15-minute mini dramas, aired through internet casts and mobile services. And this month, the story has come to life as a musical.
Most people watching musicals are from the younger generation, so they are familiar with webtoons. There's a good chance they'll watch the musical if they know the story from the internet.
But the mix of platforms is not a one-way trend. Popular musicals are being made into webtoons as well. Ju, which tells the tale of a Korean main geisha during the Shilla dynasty, will make its webtoon debut next month, some 3 years after it hit musical theaters in Korea. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with many more newscasts. Goodbye.